Hello and welcome to the garden, but just for a moment because I'm only here for a few minutes to take a quick harvest and then I'm heading indoors and hopefully I'll be making something mighty tasty with it. So at this time of year there's a very short-lived, highly seasonal harvest that one might be able to take, and that is the garlic scape. So if you're not familiar with garlic scapes, there are many different types of garlic, but they all fit into one of two camps, the hard neck or the soft neck. So generally speaking, the soft neck types don't flower and the hard neck types do. When they flower, they send up this flower spike, this long hard stem with the flower on the end. That is known as a scape, and these scapes are absolutely delicious. So that hard neck type, when it dries, you get that hard center to it. That's the end of the flower spike. If you've only grown the soft neck sorts, you probably won't get any scapes. You shouldn't do. Occasionally they can also flower, but that's not proper behavior. What we're looking for are the scapes from the hard neck variety. So I do like to have, amongst the garlic varieties, I do like to have at least one hard neck sort, because the scapes are a delicacy, and that's what I'm looking for today. So in the polytunnel here, I've got the garlic growing in and amongst the tomatoes. Oh, the garlic was here first, of course, and these are the scapes, and yeah, that's what I'm looking to harvest. So each one of these plants should throw up a flower spike, and you don't want to leave them on the plants. It's much better to take them off anyway, and they make a tasty little crop. That one hasn't done it yet. Some of these have and some of these haven't at the moment. And when these appear, you know that this garlic is, let's say, some weeks away from being ready. It's not quite ready. Maybe about 4 weeks after you take the scapes would be the ideal time to harvest the garlic. We've got a fair bit of rust around this season. It's not too bad on these plants yet, but you can see there's rust on these leaves here. So I don't know how long they'll keep going for. You can take off the affected bits of the leaves and sort of try and delay it a little bit, but I'm not going to bother. I'll lift these when they get too rusty and it doesn't affect the bulbs, or it shouldn't do. So it is what it is. But yeah, this is an indicator that there are just a few weeks left before these can be pulled. So back in the kitchen, I've got my bowl of scapes, and the whole of this is edible, but there are two parts I want to be a little bit careful with. They can get a bit tough down the bottom, so I'm looking for the part where that stem becomes reasonably tender. And this bit here around the flower, you might want to cut that out as well. So what I'm going to do today is make a nice tart, or a quiche I suppose, with these garlic scapes. Now more often than not I make a frittata. I make quite a few of those. It's great for incorporating all sorts of goodies from the garden. I tend not to make a tart simply because well, there's a few calories in the pastry that I could avoid, but the scapes only appear once a year, and I think it's not a bad idea to show them a little bit of care and attention. So for their benefit alone, of course, I will be making a tart and doing it properly. So all I'm going to do with these, I think I will nip off those ends, and then I want to find that tender part. I mean, this is quite tough there. There it's very tender. So that's the part I'm going to keep, and I'll give those all a good wash in a minute and get them ready. But the first job, of course, is the pastry. So for this tart, I want more or less a short crust pastry. So normally that would be half fat to flour, pinch of salt, a little bit of water to bind. that's a basic short crust. I'm going to shave the fat a little bit, put just a little less in, because I'm also going to add a little bit of Parmesan cheese and an egg and some very finely chopped rosemary. It's going to make a very tasty crust. So first job is to just chop that rosemary finely. And I don't want the stalk in it. That can be a little bit medicinal, and that's not what I'm looking for. So just bunch those up and very finely chop those. I have 200 grams of flour. It's just an ordinary plain flour. I'll get the rosemary in there. And then a good pinch of salt. So I'll just mix the rosemary and salt into the flour. And I've got a nice French butter here. It's been in the freezer for at least an hour or so, so it's really cold. And I'm just going to grate that straight into the flour. And I want 90 grams of that. Every now and then I just want to mix that into the flour so it doesn't all clump together. So I'm just going to rub this butter a little bit into the flour. It doesn't need a lot of work because I grated that reasonably finely. And yeah, that is quick and easy. So now for the Parmesan with a very fine grater. I have no idea how much I'm adding, but just to taste, doesn't need to be a huge amount. Although I'm never mean when it comes to cheese. Quick mix. Right, now in with the egg. And then I'll just bring that together. I may need a drop of water. Right, time for hands. Right, let me make a little bit of space here, and then out on the worktop. Needs a little bit of water. I don't add too much water in one go. I want just enough to hold it together. I don't want it too sticky. If you get it too sticky, it's going to absorb a lot of flour when you roll it and work it, and that way you end up messing with the proportions in the dough. So, and there we go. That's just about right. I don't want to knead it too long, just until it's nice and smooth. Right, that is lovely. I'm just going to cover that with some cling film, pop it in the fridge to rest while I get the scapes and the rest of the stuff dealt with. Sometimes I will just cut these into large lengths, about the length of an asparagus spear, and Other times I think it's probably better to slice them up a little bit, and for this tart I want them cut into smaller pieces, so actually maybe just smaller lengths like that. If they're too big in the tart, it does make a mess when you slice it and when you come to eat it. So I'll just slice those. I don't have to be too particular. Doesn't really matter. The important thing is I've removed any of the tougher, more woody bits. Now this tart works perfectly well without any meat, but it's also quite nice with a little bit of bacon. So I've got half a dozen rashers of a dry cured smoked streaky bacon here, and I just want to cut that into fairly small pieces. I will cook those first, and then I want to cook the scapes just a little bit before they go into the tart. Well, I've got the bacon sizzling in just a drop of olive oil, and they can have just a little bit of colour, but not too much. I don't want it too crispy because that's not a texture I want in the tart. Just cook that for another minute or so. And I'm getting some nice golden colour here, so I think that is as far as I want to take that. So in that little bit of fat there, in with the garlic scapes. There's already salt from the bacon, but I'll give them a little bit of black pepper. And just the tiniest bit of salt. Now I want to cook these until they are just starting to go tender. To help them on their way, just a splash of water. And then on with the lid. I'll turn that down a little bit. And you'll hear from, as soon as that spitting sound is gone, the water has been completely evaporated, and then they will return to fry a little bit, and then they're done. They only need a couple of minutes like that. Well, that sizzling sound has gone now, so if I take the lid off, I think most, if not all of the moisture's gone. And now we just finish those without the lid on. I don't want any moisture left in these when they go into the tart, otherwise it can make it a little bit wet. Starting to pick up a little bit of colour. So a minute or so now with the lid off, and they will be done. So these are just tender now. If I stick the knife through, yeah, it just slips in. A little bit of resistance, but they're certainly not tough. So those are ready. I'll add the bacon, and then, that was careless, and then I'll leave this to cool. I don't want that going into the tart while it's still hot. Well, it's a while since I've made any pastry, so it would be just my luck to make a mess of it while I'm filming, but I'll do my best. So I've got a tart ring here, use a flan case or whatever, and I've got a silicone mat. These are really handy, actually. I do like those. Right, a bit of flour, not too much. So this dough was chilling while I sorted out the filling. It's not too cold. Right. So I'm just going to roll out a ring. don't want too much flour on it, but a little bit to stop it sticking. And I'll brush any excess off later. You can see the little bits of rosemary in there. Little bit to go. Just checking the thickness. I don't want it too thick. So I'll cut some of this excess off where I know I've got plenty of it. I'll deal with the rest in a minute. Right. Just gently work that around. Get it into the corner. I will trim this after it has been blind baked. That looks pretty good. So I'm going to pop this back in the fridge. It's much better to bake it when it's chilled, and I'll blind bake that. I think, let's say 180 fan. I'll give it, I don't know, 12 to 15 minutes I expect, and then I'll weigh it down with some rice, and then 5 minutes after that. Right, this is chilled and the oven is hot, so I'm just going to dock the base. That will do. And then I've got some greaseproof paper. If you scrunch it up, it makes life a lot easier. Stops the paper curling up when you're trying to use it. And then I've got some old rice to weigh that down. Right, that has had, I think, 15 minutes, so I'm going to take this out carefully. Oh, that doesn't look too bad. I want to bake that for another probably 5 minutes till the bottom here is set. And if you're putting something really wet in there and you want to make sure that the pastry stays dry on the base, at this point you can just wipe over a little bit of beaten egg, and that is going to then bake and seal the bottom of the tart, but I don't need to do that this time. One tart case, I think that's not too bad. No raw dough there anymore. I need a sharp knife. So I've got a serrated knife here, and I want to do this with some care. Just trim off the top of the case. So I'll start with 4 eggs. I may need to mix up a little bit more in a minute, but let's see how that goes. Right, I want black pepper in there. And I want a good dollop of proper creme fraiche. I never measure anything too carefully. That's why I haven't got a clue whether I need an extra egg yet or not. Also depends how much filling there is. What I'd also like to get in here is a little bit of hard cheese. This is a Comte. You could use any sort of hard cheese, but this is particularly good for this kind of dish. I'll grate a little bit into the mixture and then a little bit more on top. And when I say a little, I rarely mean that with cheese. That's good. Now a good pinch of salt in there. And I want to spoon some of that around the filling. And yes, I have taken a sneaky taste of the scapes, and it's such an interesting vegetable. It's of course it's a byproduct. I'm not really growing them just for the scapes. The garlic the garlic bulbs are the main thing, of course, but they are delicious, and they're kind of a cross between, let's say, asparagus and wild garlics. They've got a bit of the texture of asparagus, but they've got that mild garlic flavour. They are absolutely delicious. I'll just keep adding a bit more of this batter. I don't like to just drop the filling in the bottom and then pour the batter over. I like to get that batter all around the filling there. Oh, you're making a mess. Of course you are. Oh, I've definitely got plenty of filling here. Get that reasonably well distributed. And then over with the rest of the batter. As I thought, one more egg. Lovely. Now I want to give this a little grating of nutmeg. I love nutmeg, and it works really well here. Oh, I love that smell. And just a little bit more cheese on the top. Let's have a look. Well, I think that looks pretty good. So I'm going to get that in a cool oven now, 150, not fan, just a conventional oven now, 150. It'll probably take about 40 minutes. I'll start to have a look at about 35 minutes, 30 minutes, and anything from 30 minutes to 40 minutes. It depends how deep it is, of course, and you want that nicely set and beautifully golden on top. So this is just out of the oven. It took a good 40, 45 minutes, I think. It's very nicely set, and you see there's a nice golden color. That will sink a little bit as it cools, I expect. And there's a lovely aroma here. I'm going to leave that for a good 10 minutes or so before I have a little taste. Well, I've been faffing around with this all afternoon. It is time for me to get a little taste. Well, it looks all right. That's interesting. The garlic scapes are perfectly tender. There's a hint of sweetness with them, and that's completely delicious. It is a bit of a faff to make a tart like this from scratch, but you only get those scapes once a year, so I think it's worth the effort. And yeah, that's delicious. It would be fine without the bacon, but there's just that little bit of bacon in it. You can just taste that smokiness, and yeah, and of course, who doesn't love some cheese? So this pie, that's dinner sorted and lunch tomorrow. It's lovely warm, but of course it's going to be great cold as well. Anyway, that is all for this video. If you've got some garlic scapes in the garden, I hope you enjoy them. Lots of other ways to prepare them, but in a quiche or tart like this, or then maybe a frittata, that's a really great way to have them. Anyway, thanks ever so much for watching, and bye for now.